In this video, I've got two cues that apply to all your back exercises at the gym. Now, the first cue is to focus on the middle of your sternum. So when you're doing the lengthening phase of the exercise, you're folding in from your sternum. And when you're doing the concentric or the contracting phase of the back exercise, you're going to be lifted tall through your sternum. And that allows you to work a nice range of motion through those back muscles. Now, the second cue is to bring your shoulders to your back pocket when you're doing the concentric or when you're squeezing your back muscles. And that goes hand in hand with being lifted tall through your sternum. So when you're lifted tall, you're going to bring your shoulders to your back pockets. So these two cues, they apply to all your back exercises, whether you're doing exercise in this frontal plane like a lat pull down or a pull up, whether you're doing anything in this horizontal plane like a face pull or a seated row, or whether you're doing any bent over row exercise, whether it be a single arm or a double arm row. An important concept to talk about though is working the full range of motion with load. So if you're working the full range of motion, if you're really extending the muscle when you're collapsing in through your chest, when you're really lengthening the muscle, your muscle isn't going to be at the strongest point there. So if you have a lot of load or a lot of weight and you're working the full range of motion, well, you put a lot more stress through the muscle when it's in a weakened position. It also puts a lot more strain through the ligaments, tendons, and the joints there. So if you're working a full range of motion, you don't want to add as much weight or as much load so that you're not as susceptible to injury. If you want to focus more on strength and hypertrophy, so more weight and less reps, you work a shorter range of motion with the muscle. So you're using and targeting the muscle when it's at its strongest lengths, and that means you're again less susceptible to injury. So to summarize that, if you're working a full range of motion where you're really folding through your chest, you're going to have more repetitions with lighter weight because there's less strain on the tissues at their end range and you're less susceptible to injury. If you're doing more of a strength or hypertrophy-based exercise, more weights, less reps, and you're working a shorter range of motion with the muscle. Another important concept to be aware of is that if you have more rounding through your mid-back, that you want to limit how much you repetitively train into flexion there. Now, the muscles of your mid-back, if you have that increased kyphotic posture, they're likely already more lengthened. So the further you go into that full range of motion, the more you're going to lengthen those muscles, and the more you're going to repetitively train flexion into your mid-back. So limit how much you round through your mid-back and limit the range of motion that you're working through. Really focus on the concentric part of the exercise. So the contraction part where you're squeezing your back muscles, really lifting tall through your sternum when you do so, and really focusing on bringing your shoulders to your back pocket so you get the most squeeze out of the exercise. I'm going to show you now a few examples of how this applies to different back exercises in the gym. The first exercise example is a pull-up. As you move to the top of the movement, you're going to be lifted tall through the middle of your chest, squeezing your shoulders to your back pockets. The nature of a pull-up and a lat pull-down means that when you're in a fully extended and lengthened position, that it doesn't require excessive rounding through your mid-back, so you're going to want to build to a full range of motion for this one. The next exercise example is a face pull, and in this variation you can see that I'm really rounding through my back, lengthening my back muscles, folding from my chest. As I pull back, I'm lifting tall through my chest, bringing my shoulders to my back pocket. In this example with more weight, I'm working a shorter range of the muscle and I'm not rounding as much through my mid-back, still focusing on being lifted tall and squeezing my shoulders to my back pocket. In this example, we're doing a bent over row. We definitely want to be keeping a neutral and rigid spine for this exercise. You're only required to subtly collapse through the center of your sternum. However, you really want to focus on being lifted tall from that point, squeezing your shoulders to your back pocket. And as you can see, there's a subtle bit of hip extension as I come up, making sure though you're keeping your spine rigid and stiff. The final exercise example is a seated row, and this exercise allows you to get the most flexion through your thoracic spine and lengthening through your back muscles, as you can see here. As I add more weight, you can see we're working a shorter range, which means less rounding through our mid-back. As you've seen with these examples, these two cues will help you through all the back exercises that you perform in the gym.